Folks, and as I'm recording this, it is just past the middle part of August, which means that if you are running a September marathon, and a lot of people are, you are just about to start or will be shortly starting taper time. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the marathon taper. Some of this applies to the half and the others as well, but this is really a little bit more marathon specific on things that you should or should not be doing during the taper. So taper, as you know, is traditionally 2 to 3 weeks. So how do you know how much longer you want it to be? Well, a lot of it depends on how your training cycle has been and how your experience has been. So why does the training cycle come into play and experience? Well, because the reason for taper is to allow the body to repair from the relative poundings and rigors of marathon training, and to allow your muscles to kind of satiate themselves with glycogen. So let's go back to why the training cycle and the experience matter. So let's say that during your training cycle, you had to take some time off for some reason. You had a trip and you couldn't run, you had an injury, and you had some time off. Well, that has an impact for how much recovery your body is going to need to have. So what's happening in training has a little bit of impact on what you're going to do. And then experience matters as well, because the more experienced you are as a marathoner, the faster your body recovers, really the less taper time that you need. The less experienced you are, the more taper time. In fact, if it's your very first marathon, in some cases, it might be a 3 to 4 week taper. So it does vary. On average, 2 to 3, but think about your training cycle and think about your experience. So here's the first rule, and I think this is one of the biggest mistakes people make in the marathon, is you want to reduce your volume, but not the intensity. So you run less, but you don't eliminate the intensity. Too many people reduce their volume by too much, and they take the intensity out. And what happens on race day, as opposed to being really rested, their legs are dead. Your body loves routine. If you're used to doing some harder runs on Tuesday, you're still going to do those harder runs on Tuesdays, but you're going to reduce the volume way back. Now, obviously, if you're used to doing a hard run the day before a long run, I'm not going to recommend you do a hard run the day before a marathon, but by and large, reduce the volume, but don't reduce your intensity. So how much you reduce the volume by? So week 1 is typically about 30% of what your miles have been in a typical week over like the last 4 or 5 peak weeks, not necessarily the peak week. Week 2 is typically about 60% of the miles. And for a race week, I kind of look and say, well, what was your average week? And kind of get your total miles close, including the marathon, to what your average weekly miles were. So how might that look? Well, if you're doing 50 miles per week, that first week, maybe you're down to about 35 to 40 miles. Again, there's a lot of variation, as I mentioned before. Your second week, maybe 20 to 30 miles. The week of the race, maybe 15 to 20 miles plus the marathon. It matters a little bit to me what day is the marathon on. Saturday versus Sunday is going to matter in that. But again, I'll go back to the main rule: reduce volume, but don't reduce intensity, and don't reduce the volume too much, because too much is going to give you dead legs on race day. Make sure you also reduce your other activities. So it's not just the running that you want to reduce, it's other exercise-related activities. So for example, other aerobic activities, biking, swimming, elliptical, whatever they would be, you also want to follow the same rule with them. Reduce the volume, but not the intensity. Strength work is a big one. Hopefully you're doing strength work a couple times a week. You need to reduce that. I start tapering my strength work about 2 weeks out. First, by reducing my volume. So if I'm used to do, say, 3 sets of something with 10 reps, maybe I'm still doing 3 sets, but I'm going down to 5 reps. I'm going to start bringing that back. It's a really important thing, because in strength work, what you're really trying to do, you're trying to damage your body, right? You're trying to do strength work to make micro tears in the muscles. Your body repairs them so that you're stronger. We don't want any micro tears when we're doing our taper, because the whole purpose of taper is to repair the body, not to damage it. So you really want to start reducing that strength work. And then the week of, I typically get down to really just more of the mobility work. So I'll go through the motions, but very lightweight. I don't want to do any damage at all. But the bottom line is, make sure you're not just reducing volume and intensity. If you're running, it really should be of everything. Getting a deep massage. A lot of people like to get a deep massage race week. That's perfectly fine. At least 3 days, if not more, out. If you do that deep massage too close, same thing, that deep massage can do a little bit of muscle damage. You don't want that too close to your race. So if you get a deep massage, what I think is great, at least 3, 4, 5 days out for doing that. Reduce calories in. Now this is a tricky one, because you want to make sure that you're eating enough. You're trying to repair your body. You're trying to satiate your muscles with glycogen. You're probably doing some carbo loading. But at the same time, when you're not doing all the running and other activities where you were doing before, if you eat at the same level, you're going to go into the race a couple of pounds heavier. Think a couple pounds doesn't matter? Get 2 cans of soup. There's 2 pounds. Run with those. It does matter a little bit. So it's tricky. I'd rather you overeat than undereat, but you probably need to reduce your calories a little bit when you're in taper as well. And then finally, I think this is the second biggest mistake that people make in taper. Save it for the race. When we're in taper, we're trying to get ready for the race. This is not the time for any last-minute training to get that last really hard workout in to kind of bump your fitness up. You're done with that. We're not training to improve fitness. We're trying to maintain fitness, kind of minimize the loss of fitness as you're running a little bit less. But the other thing that happens is the horses want to run. So maybe you've got an easy workout plan. Let's say it's 5 miles at a 9-minute pace, just to use an example. And you're feeling great. And 8:30 is feeling really easy. I'm going to tell you, dial that back to 9. Don't let that happen. The horses want to run because you're in taper. Save it for the race. Keep the runs at the prescribed effort or pace. Don't let it get away from you. As I said, biggest mistake, people reduce too much and they get rid of their intensity, so reduce volume, not intensity, and then save it for race day. And then finally, taper crazies. Just be prepared. Taper crazies are normal. I will guarantee during taper, you're going to feel aches and pains you never felt before. You're going to be convinced that you're probably going to lose a leg before the race can even start. You'll feel a little bit off one day. It's probably the bubonic plague or some undiagnosed disease that's going to take you out. Those things are really normal. So if you get that little niggle and it's not going away for a few days, maybe you look at it. But other than that, just prepare for the taper crazies. But more importantly, have a great race.